Okay, so welcome back to our session of discussion of the movie The Last Forest. That's part of our UFMG Summer School in Brazilian Studies. And we have the honor of having Professor Ulisses Panicete together with us. Thank you very much again, Professor, for coming, for joining us, for enlightening us with your words and your discussion. I think it's going to be a prolific afternoon for all of us. And I hope you'll all enjoy. I just might add a few words about Professor Ulisses. He's a public health physician at UFMG with a doctorate in international relations from Johns Hopkins University. He's also a doctor in political sciences from UFMG, and he's a professor at the Department of Preventive and Social Medicine at the Faculty of Medicine of the university. He is the founder of the Center for International Relations at the UFMG School of Medicine, and at the World Health Organization in Geneva, he founded and coordinated the World Secretariat of EVIPNet, a WHO program that promotes the systematic use of evidence, scientific contributions to health policy making in 42 countries in Africa, the Americas, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. He was a founding member of WHO Guide Review Committee. He worked at the Pan American Health Organization in promoting health policies. And among many other projects, he was a researcher at the WHO Collaborating Center at the University of Texas and was a visiting professor at Georgetown University. But this is just a tiny little part of his extensive curriculum. Thank you very much, Professor. The floor is yours. I'm sorry, Professor. I'm so sorry. I forgot the most important part, which is how we are going to organize the session. Today, we are going to allow microphones to be opened. So please, Professor Ulisses, he wanted us to have a discussion. So he is going to introduce the topic, maybe. And then if you want to say something, or if you want to contribute to the debate, you raise your hand, and then you'll be called by me, and then you can ask the question. Please keep your questions short, and you can make one question at a time, okay? And you can also still use the chat box if you don't want to speak, okay? So, Professor, I'm so sorry for this. My lack of organization, trying to organize. So now the floor is yours.
Not at all, Luciana. It's thank you so much for your generous words. I think I should start with a disclaimer. As I was mentioning to Luciana, I am not, let's say that I'm a wannabe scholar in indigenous issues. So I do not consider myself indigenist. So indigenists for me are people like Bruno Pereira, who we mourn very much, that was killed together with Tom Phillips, as I believe all of you know, in a very tragic incident that was clearly motivated by the current spirit in the Brazilian government that look at the Amazon only as a reservoir for commodities, right? Be them minerals, be them cattle, and even the enormous amount of potential pharmaceutical products that exist in the biodiversity of the Amazon is not in the contemplation of this government at this point. So I say this because I would really start by asking you a question, and you feel free to answer, as of course, as you know, at the beginning, just to help us to break the ice and warm up this conversation. And I would like to ask you, what do you think are the major crises that the world is confronting at this moment nowadays? So this strongest crisis that humanity is facing nowadays, just to list some of them, I would appreciate very much your reflection.
So
Victoria.
Victoria, please.
And just one thing, Luciano, before we start, if you could always identify yourself by name, country, and university, would be very helpful for us.
Excellent. So Victoria, you can, where is she?
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Good afternoon. I would say that COVID-19 is one of the major crises that the world is facing at this time, because it's like a thing that affects all the countries in the world. So COVID-19 is one of them.
And Victoria, where are you from and what's your university?
Okay, I'm Adroja Victoria. I'm from Nigeria. I'm from the University of Ibadan, Nigeria.
Oh, Nigeria, great.
Very good.
Prenish also wants to speak.
Yeah, I'm Pranish from Canada, the University of Alberta. I believe one of the greatest crises that we're currently going through is the breakdown of society based on government. So we're at a time and point where democracy versus autocracy, and which is the most efficient system and how we can rule and govern appropriately. Democracy has proven to be inefficient, but autocracies have also been proven to be inefficient, but they've also had their merits. And at this point in time, there's been a rise in autocratic types of governing. The rise of Donald Trump, I believe your president, Bolsonaro, a lot of the presidents are trying to now run with authoritarian means. So I believe just simply our fundamental way of governing is very broken, and we don't have a pathway forward into the 22nd century.
Great. Marcela also wants to share with us.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Marcela. I'm from Brazil. I study at UFMG. And in my opinion, I would say that maybe humanitarian crisis, because we have plenty of immigration and wars going on. So I would say that it's a main point for me.
Excellent. Bruna, Miguel. We can't hear you, Bruna. We can't hear you. Can you hear her? Because I can't.
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna pass the word to Anthony, and then you fix your microphone, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so Anthony, please.
Hi, my name is Anthony Wagner. I'm from the United States, a PhD student at NYU, and I work at a higher ed association in the Mid-Atlantic, of which Johns Hopkins is a member. But I think one of the biggest challenges, especially in the United States, that we face isn't just the authoritarian politics of the last 4 years with Donald Trump, but a lack of trust and political polarization within communities and between people who disagree on important issues.
Excellent, thank you. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Maiguna, is that?
Yes, it's correct. Okay, hello for everyone. I'm Maiguna and I'm from University of Central Asia, Tajikistan. And I would like to mention that there is a few problems that concern me, and these are global problems. But the more problem we are one of the problem we are facing, student and also people here, is like balance between work and life. Because of that, like this balance can bring to problems and some kind of disease. And because of them, for me, it's like one of the highlighted crises people are facing like nowadays. Yeah, I wanted to share
Good.
this.
Good. Bruna. Bruna is, I think she's frozen. Probably she's having some internet issues, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I would like to add something though. I think the main problem we have nowadays are the billionaires. I think billionaires should not exist. And consumption and capitalism. I mean, not that I don't like capitalism or so, but it's this avidity of buying and of having things, you know. I think this is the main problem.
So Bruna is
Bruna
still,
is frozen. Yeah.
yeah, what a pity.
Let's just hear Argelia.
Hello, my name is Argelia. I am from Mexico. I'm currently attending UC Davis in California in the United States. One of the biggest problems I think facing today is climate change, and in some ways also over tourism of certain places, because from where I am from, there is the tourism industry has pushed people out of their traditional homelands and has damaged some important archaeological sites as well.
Mhm.
I think Bruna is back with us. Are you, Bruna? We can't hear you. Oh, I'll just type it. Good. Great. So I'm going to read it out loud. I would say climate change and environmental degradation, which plays into all the issues people have touched on. I think it plays into capitalism, health, and medicine as well. And where are you from, Bruna? Type in again.
She's from the University
I'm
of Warwick.
from Warwick, and she is Portuguese.
Very
But
good.
she studied in, okay.
Wow.
Professor, who is right? I'm kidding.
Wow. Yeah, you know, if I had to grade it, I would give an A+ for all the answers, you know, because there is no, first of all, there is no incorrect answer or a silly question here for us. So you feel free also to ask questions or to provide any comment at any time. This is part of the way we are going to discuss. If we were just telling my first experience with indigenous people in the south of the Amazon, north of the state of Mato Grosso, was we were having a course on health issues for people who worked with indigenous people, including indigenous people like shamans and all that stuff. And it was supposed to be a very traditional course, and we kind of subverted this course. This was way back in last century. So this was 1978. And you know, I saw that one indigenous woman that had her baby 24/7 died on her body you know, and she was so close to that baby, and the baby would, you know, cry a bit. She would give water, and the baby would cry again, and she would breastfeed and change the baby in position depending on the crying that this baby had. So we asked her, you know, you do different things and it appeases the baby and he feels well. And she said, you have to learn how to understand their language, which is crying. So for different types of crying, she would provide some different type of care to the baby, and that called my attention. The other thing is that she paid attention to everything. I mean, she was totally focused on what we were discussing and all that stuff. And she said, you know, I asked her, you know, how interested she was, and she said, when I go back, I will have a 12-hour trip by bus. Then I'll have to walk another hour, and I will arrive at my people. And I will arrive there around 3, 4 in the morning, and I'll have to wake up the cacique, you know, the big political leader in the village, and he will wake everybody. We will light a fire, and we will all sit, the whole community will sit around the fire, and we will discuss, and I have to share what I learned, okay? So let's imagine that we are all sitting around a fire, and we can talk, we can contribute. So we will be moving a bit away from what several of you mentioned in relation, Pranish mentioned that, Anthony mentioned that, we will move away from this authoritarian one-way communication that we are used in many of our countries, right? And we'll try to share. So if I'm talking too much, please interrupt me. It's not supposed to be this way. So this is one issue that we can do to try to break our colonized minds and our, worse than that, colonizer minds. Okay, so this is the first exercise we will do. So, of course, all the questions were correct. I was surprised that climate change and the environment was not the first one. So, but I knew it's there because everybody shares this concern, I'm pretty sure. So in terms of democracy and autocracy, I would say that we have a lot to learn with indigenous people everywhere, right? And I would like to pose one question already in relation to this. Not really a question, but a comment that, you know, indigenous people, they don't have, well, in Brazil, they have around 1,000 years of culture. Those contemporary indigenous in Brazil have histories of their people of more than 1,000 years. So if we think about that, right, it seems from our outsider minds that they are rigid, that they have one culture and that's it. First of all, there is a huge diversity of cultures, including within one ethnicity, you may find different visions. And more than that, they are not even, well, if we take exception to still the completely isolated populations that are isolated by choice, that they will run away from any attempt from anyone in the Brazilian or international society to reach to them. But even those, they learn with time, they evolve their thoughts, right? Even if it is the thought of, I don't want anything to do with those people outside. But, and I say this because in terms of democracy, we are seeing more and more ethnicities changing their traditional view, for instance, toward women. In some ethnicities, the pajé, the shaman, could only be a man, and this is changing. I have a very dear friend and former student called Adana Cambeba, and she is from an ethnicity in the Amazon, closer to Peru. And she graduated this year in February in medicine by UFMG. UFMG has, our School of Medicine has 2 places for indigenous people per year, right? And they are assured a participation in our course. And so she graduated here, but at the same time, she's working harder even, I would say, than for a medical student. And she's working hard to become a pajé, a woman pajé. And she arrived today, but she could not be here with us, but she arrived today from a tour all over Brazil in which she meets shamans, and she is doing a very strict diet and a whole process. So it shows that the thought, the indigenous thought, is not crystallized, it evolves as well. Today, one of the greatest Brazilian thinker, and please take note of this name, and I will leave in the chat, Ailton Krenak. And the Krenak people are from, sorry, it's spelled wrong. It's Ailton. And Ailton Krenak is probably one of the among the 10 most fantastic thinkers in Brazil. One of the 10 people that are contributing more for our evolution of thought in Brazil. He has several books, and I would strongly recommend one of them, which is most popular, is this book here, and it's called Ideas to Postpone the End of the World. Postpone the end of the world. Okay. So I left here in our chat as well, because I strongly recommend you read it, because it's a completely different look at the problems that we are confronting from a point of view that differs from many thinkers, but traditional thinkers, philosophers and anthropologists and others. So I strongly recommend this reading to you. And Ailton Krenak talks mostly about those problems that you identified, right? Such as this dichotomy from democracy and autocracy in a world that sometimes it's hard to see why democracies are decadent, and if they are truly democracies, or if they are a form of, let's say, negotiated autocracy with this name of democracy, right? In which, through the appearance of democracy, the appearance of debate, the appearance of the value of different opinions, if those democracies are not trying just to control the debate, manipulate the debate, and to, favor what Luciana called the billionaires, which I think is an image like in a movie, the bad guy movie, right? It's because they represent a moment of humanity in which inequalities are really out there for everyone to see, right? In which a few people in which Elon Musk can buy Twitter and pretend that he wants a democratic debate, while he knows that this virtual debate can be easily manipulated, right? So,
I just want to add,
please.
essentially what you just mentioned there. I talked to students from India, like students who live on my campus, attend my campus, that are from India. And a lot of these students, these Indian students, they like to say that India, on paper, again, has the world's biggest democracy, but on the street level, on the daily living, democracy is not reflected at all. It's corruption at its finest. It's who can buy favors. It's all about alliances. It's all about special interests. So there are merits on why democracy fails, because in a way, these students look at it like you don't have the right people, right? Like it follows down on more. It goes down a bit deeper. Like democracy in theory is great. Democracy has been an idea here since the ancient Greeks, but there hasn't been a time in the world where democracy has been efficient. America was founded in the 1700s based on democracy, but they broke down as a society in the 1800s with civil war. And then, of course, today with Donald Trump and the post-Donald Trump era, democracy is again at danger, not just in America, but even in the rest of the world. I even read in a report where the Arab world, where the Arab Spring, they were in a fight for democracy. They're in a fight for change. So because they believe democracy could solve all these issues, that all people together could contribute together with their ideas, and through democracy, could the best ideas can come out and achieve success for the problems. But a lot of analysis that I've read from recent reports have said a lot of Arabs, and through polling, fell out of love with democracy and view the Arab Spring as now being a pointless time in the 2010s, because the problems are still there. Nothing's fixed. Some Arabs even view it as even a worser time than when they were under an autocracy and dictatorship. So when you're looking at democracy, it really becomes to who makes that democracy, who's in the government, who can be held accountable, and who can be held, morally suspectable to the rule of law, right? It really comes down to a more philosophical debate on, which type of human beings should function in government, because democracy can easily get out of hand as well.
That's a fantastic contribution, Pranish, and I thank you very much. And it adds to what Anthony mentioned also about political polarization, when you mentioned Trump and what we are experiencing in Brazil. So I take this point first, and please let me make a clarification. I am totally pro-democratic, totally, right? I lived since I was 11. I know all you guys had a class about the Brazilian military dictatorship. And So I lived most of my youth under military dictatorship. You know, when I was 11 years old, I went to class at a public school. When I arrived there in the morning of the coup that began the military dictatorship, there was a firefighter, which was the image of our heroes. And he had a machine gun in his hand because he was a military firefighter. And he was taking care, no, the school is closed, no one can come here. So, you know, this is what I lived most of my youth, right? For 21 years. And so we are in a situation that that we are hanging to democracy as a lifesaver. But we have to be very critical, and I welcome very much your comments, because we have to be very critical of what is this democracy and what does this have to do with the last forest. It's because the organization of many, not all, but most of the indigenous ethnicities in Brazil, they have a democratic organization that is very direct. There is direct participation. There is enormous involvement of all people in the decisions, and in some decisions they have already taken hundreds of years ago, and they just follow them. But critically, they understand that since they are very small, they understand that way of life, that way of decision making. So is there, is there some, huge inequalities against women? Yes, in many of the ethnicities. But this is changing, which I think is the most fantastic thing. And also, children are very, very much a part of this democracy in many, many ways, right? I remember another case that is, it's repeated in many ways. A woman that a white person was examining, looking at how she worked, doing pottery, very nice pottery. And she would put the pottery to dry on the sun. And her son, about 3 years old, would come with a little stick and break them. So this indigenous asked the woman, but, why do you let him do this? He's breaking your work. And she said, I like to make pots. He likes to break them. When he gets older, he will understand, why he cannot. If he breaks it, there will be no way to carry the water. And he will learn, right? So it's a form of inclusion in the community that I think is an example for us. When we talk about, very interesting, Maiguna mentioned this balance between work and life. The most interesting thing is that there is no dichotomy for Brazilian indigenous people between work and life. Work and life are the same thing, right? They work, they eat, they play, they swim, they make love. It's all part of the same thing. They don't separate as we do. Now it's leisure. Now it's work. From 8 to 5, I work, and then it's happy hour time. No, it doesn't work this way. So it's another difference that I wanted to bring. Victoria, right at the beginning, brought us the COVID-19, which we are all living in a dramatic way, right? And it's a global problem. Where did COVID-19 come from? Where did the SARS-2 virus came from? Who is going to tell me?
I wouldn't dare. I think nobody knows.
Well, there is strong, very, very strong evidence that came from wildlife animals, especially two types of mammals that are in China, right? And that are brought to the markets to alive, to be slaughtered and eaten, right? So, well, there is this rumor about lab issues. This is, used as propaganda, and Trump told this, and people say it's the communist virus, it's the red virus. So there's all those type of prejudices in relation to China. But the scientific evidence, confirmed mostly by WHO, is that it came from the environment, from the forests, right? And so epidemics, we saw, and Luciana and I were talking about that about 2 weeks ago. Davi Kopenawa, the shaman that stars in the movie you saw, he came to FMG. He's a visiting professor. So he comes at least every 2 years, he comes, and he spends some time at the university. And he said it clearly. Do you think COVID-19 is a tragedy? Is that because you have not seen what I have seen in my dreams, in my shamanic dreams? Because the next ones will be much, much worse. We can believe or not, but he has a point, right? He has a point. And they have a belief, the Yanomamis have a belief that, Omama, their goddess, dig big holes and hid all minerals very deep, because they represented all the evil in the world. And now the white man comes and dig them out. He uses in his book that I also strongly recommend, which is called The Falling Sky, and has an English version that you can find on, easily. And he, Davi Kopenawa mentioned, he calls the smoke / epidemics. He relates the epidemics to mineral exploitation, to firing, and all that stuff, because he says, well, all the evil stuff will run away from the forests and contaminate everybody. See,
I just want to add, I just want to add when that moment in the movie showed up, I thought that was really interesting, because in the West, right, or the Europeans, through European interactions, we're very science-based, we have our own way of thinking. And it's not to say that the indigenous people, when they said that the evil was in the ground, you dig it up and it comes out, right? Whether you want to believe that or not, metaphorically, they were onto something. Like they knew what they were talking about without actually being scientific. So essentially what I'm trying to get at is, sometimes the indigenous folk, they raise a lot of good merits, even though we don't understand them at first. there is definitely some truth and merits to what they're trying to explain, what they're trying to get at. And essentially what they were trying to get at and what we can take out of it more broadly is, if you damage the earth by digging the earth and you damage the earth, there's going to be consequences. And through their metaphor of it being evil and through their belief of it being evil, that's kind of equivalent. So they have a different way of explaining it. They have a different way of showing it. But essentially, they have enough merit to definitely believe what they believe. Like the merit is there. So it's not completely that.
Because
It's just
that's exactly
a falsified belief.
That's exactly what's happening, right?
Yeah.
The earth is being destroyed because we are taking the minerals out of it. For example, Minas Gerais, our country, our state.
Hey,
We are being devastated by mining. There are holes in this state. That's it.
exactly.
I would just like to, sorry, I would just like to say something. I don't know if you know this guy, but it's a Brazilian poet. Is Carlos Drummond de Andrade, and he writes a lot about it. There is I forgot the name of the book in which he combined all these poems, but he essentially talks about that, about how his city, that is Itabira here in Minas Gerais, was slowly destroyed by the mines, and it's really beautiful. If you guys are interested, I guess you might like it.
Yeah, thank you, Marcelo. By the way, Carlos Drummond de Andrade is the favorite poet of Ailton Krenak, of this this indigenous philosopher that we talked about, who is from Minas Gerais. The Krenak people are in the region of the Vale do Rio Doce, which was devastated by mining, right? By the criminal act of the company, a British and Brazilian company working together, that devastated, caused several deaths directly, and still has a huge environmental impact many years after it. So that's a very thank you for bringing poetry to this, because it has all to do. Prenish, I agree with you that if you talk with Ailton Krenak, he's very radical in criticizing the world system, the United Nations and all that, because he thinks that this is to protect only humanity. And in the belief of most indigenous people, they believe not only in the human being, they believe that all elements of nature are beings, right? So a rock is a being and has a soul, right? At the same time that plants have a soul, the animals have a soul as well. They believe that they are only a part of this, right? There is no dichotomy between nature and humanity for them. It's only one thing, right? So it's another belief that we will take out of the movie, that we will get to the movie very soon with your help. So let me see here.
I think Annelisa wants to speak.
Please.
Annelisa, please.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I raised my hand because I wanted to talk about this mining thing subject. I am from Itabira. I grew there, and I can talk very closely and very personally about the mining, the company Vale, and the impacts of mining. I lived in a street very, very close to the mining complex. My house shook like with the explosions of they expanding their holes to mine more stuff. And eventually, when I was 13, the company started to removed the houses of my neighborhood because they wanted to expand the mining complex. They say they were making a green corridor, something like that, but obviously not. They're not going to do that. And my family and everyone in the neighborhood, we had to move. They paid the value of the area, not the house. So if we had a really fancy house, they didn't care. They're paying for the space. And they just expelled us, basically. And I have a lot of respiratory problems. Many children are born there with respiratory problems because of the pollution of the air. So there's a lot of things that mining can do to your life. I believe there are not indigenous community in Itabira, but I am sure there are quilombolas, where they are the African descendants, and they build instead of like living in the city, they build their community with their culture and etc. And eventually they are affected by mining. So that's it. That's my statement.
Thank you so much, Annelisa. This is very helpful for us as well, because it places the human factor, right? You are there. And the poet, is talking about that for, he's already not among us any longer, but he has been talking for that for many, many decades, right? So it shows what they leave behind, what mining leaves behind. And also, it would be a bit almost ridiculous if we just threw, what's the expression, threw the water with the baby, the water bath with the baby, but or something like that. But we need minerals, to exist with this huge population. We need minerals, but the way we can work with what we already have and explore it in a way that is not as devastating as it is, especially in Brazil and some other low and middle income countries. I think it's something that we have to reflect.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a little thing I remembered. Right now, I live close to barragem. I don't know how to say that in English.
Dam.
It's a dam.
Yeah.
Yes, a reject dam, and we have siren tests every month in case, like, the siren needs to function because the dam is about to break. We saw that the last class of geology or geography, Brazilian geography, we saw about dam breaking in Minas. So the company still haunts the city and still haunts my family there that still lives there.
Yes. Haunts, I would think, right? I mean, like assombra, né?
Haunts, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I just have some. Oh, sorry about that. I just have something to add about the movie. So I believe that you all, from what I saw, based on the movie, and I believe you all in Brazil have experienced, obviously, indigenous people down over there. So in contrast to Canada's indigenous people, so it seems that indigenous people, nonetheless, at least in comparison, get to enjoy more of their way of life in Brazil than in Canada. In Canada, literally, the government has basically done a lot of terrible things to really, really forcefully literally destroy the culture and really assimilate each and every single indigenous person. In our society, a lot of the indigenous people are mainstreamed, but they have been mainstreamed unsuccessfully. They are in poverty. They are at the bottom of the racial totem pole. They are disrespected. They're not looked at. They get into drugs. They get into alcohol. They're not
Friend,
respected in the school systems. It's very the Canadian government has been successful in mainstreaming them, but it hasn't been good for them at all. They've even separated kids
excellent.
from their own families because the Canadian government believed that simply these children should not be raised with their family and their old indigenous cultural values. That if we can
Very
school them
good.
in our Canadian
Friend,
ways. Oh, go
Prince,
ahead.
sorry to interrupt you a little bit, but I want very much, this is key for us, and I want very much to go back to this specific discussion. I was going to ask you about Canada, because we have had some, I teach a course on global perspectives of Indigenous health, and we have had several Canadian Indigenous leaders with us. And so I would like very much to go back to this if you don't mind. Okay.
Yes, for sure. I just thought it was interesting
It's
for
key for us.
comparison.
No, very much. It's key for us. So we are focused a little bit on our perceptions of global crisis and what do Indigenous people have to do with this? Okay. So and this is exactly the next step I would like to go. I would like just to comment before that what Argelia, our colleague from Mexico, mentioned. She mentioned climate change, of course. She mentioned over tourism, which is over tourism as displacement. No, the current government wants to do resorts all over Brazil, including gambling resorts, right? And there is no study about the impact this will do, not only on indigenous life, but in all the environment and all the stuff. So it's a key issue that Argelia mentioned to us. And Bruna mentioned about climate change, capitalism, and health. So we talked already about a bit about the epidemics. What does this have to do with indigenous people as well? But there is one issue that we didn't talk very clearly about, which is, well, we touched the issue. We mentioned capitalism. Luciana mentioned about the inequality and the avidity of buying things, of consuming things that we sometimes don't really need them, but we buy them because there is a whole manipulation process and all this stuff. Davi Kopenawa calls this, he calls capitalism mercadoria, which would be merchandise. How you transform in something that is precious for the survival of humanity, and thinking about the survival of indigenous people, how do you transform this into a commodity, into a merchandise? Okay. And so I'm allowing myself to be a bit romantic now, and we will fix this along the conversation, but to think very radically about that. Then we'll see what is possible, right? What we can do. But let's see, let's try to share, do the opposite. We have been trying to impose the colonizer thinking on those people, on these people, right? And I'm trying to do the opposite. Let's radicalize with their thinking, and then we'll see what is left for us that are not indigenous, okay? So I think we covered very much, but I would, all the issues that you raised in terms of global crisis. But Who knows how many indigenous people there are in Brazil? Someone knows? Have you looked around? A total of number of individuals.
Individuals, I don't know, but I think there are more than 300 populations. Like,
yes, in a matter of fact, this is a bit more than that. Before 1500, when Brazil was quote unquote discovered by the colonizers, when they arrived in Brazil, it's estimated that there were around 5 million original people living in Brazil, and maybe more, but it's estimated around 5 million. This went down to around the hundreds of thousands. And now, in the last census made, which I think it was 2016, we have around 820,000 indigenous individuals in Brazil. Okay, of them, we have around 500,000 living in forest areas or rural areas close to forests, and the rest are urbanized. Around 36% live in urban areas. Okay, so if we say 800,000 people, this is less than we have 220 million people in Brazil, right? So this is less than 0.5% of the Brazilian population. So a person with a cynical attitude would say, why bother? Unfortunately, that's what we are hearing from our government. That's what we are hearing from our president, current president, I hope, that he will not be here next year. And maybe the majority of Brazilians think that, but this is the thought that he is representing. Why bother? These are 800,000 people. It's not even, we have so many cities in Brazil that have much more than that, right? So why bother? And in my point of view, the rationale for this discussion for us here, why this is a point that is fundamental for Brazilian studies, the situation of indigenous people in Brazil, their thought, their vision of the world, their cosmovision, I think exactly that what we can call the indigenous cause, some people call the indigenous question, is exactly because all they symbolize and they bring together all those global crises that we discussed about and several others. Okay, they're talking about the environment, they're talking about climate change, they're talking about the exploitation of natural resources, they're talking about the water, right? That will be the rarest and most important commodity until the end of this century. And they're talking about they're talking about democracy with their vision of democracy. They're talking about polarization. All those issues, they come together in what I call the indigenous cause, right? So I think this explains a lot. What happened from 5 million to 800, having in between populations totally decimated, many languages disappeared, many ethnicities disappeared in Brazil by imported diseases, by extermination by conflict, including as it happened in Canada, as it happened in the US, using rivalries between different ethnicities to use them in combat for colonization, right? Land grabbing, slavery, and most of all, what Ailton Krenak and Davi Kopenhauer call, Ailton Krenak gave this neologism, which is epistemology side, in the sense that is the assassination of knowledge, right? The destruction of a culture. Why does Bolsonaro and his followers want to really see indigenous people either what he calls acculturated, right? Aculturado, or decimated? Why does he close his eyes and fail to protect indigenous people living in the forests? Because their thought is anti-capitalist. Their thoughts in relation to all those crises are very radical, right? Their way of life, the way in which you don't divide what is leisure, what is work, what is quality of life, what is human relationship, and the relationship of humans with minerals, with animals, with plants, right? He is against this way of thinking, because this way of thinking will create a different type of accumulation of wealth that we are experiencing now, with a huge concentration of wealth in very few individuals. Less than 1% of the population in the world owns much more than 50% of the wealth in the world. So, indigenous people are radically against this. So they want to kill a culture. They want to kill a way of thinking. And that's why I think the issue of indigenous populations is so radically important globally as well, to all of us. That's what Ailton Krenak is saying. How can we postpone the end of the world? How can we minimize the end of the world? And he raises some very radical ideas about that. Does anyone want to make a comment about that? So let's move ahead a little bit.
I think Daniela wants to say something.
Daniela, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daniela from Cesar Vallejo University in Peru. I would like to add about the mining industries, because I think that the mining industries just think in what's happening now or in a near future, but they don't really think in what could happen in the future and what could be the future consequences. Because as David Kopenhauer said, non-indigenous people are selfish, and they just dream about what they will do with the money. But in the fact, that money probably wouldn't serve at all if there's no more land to dig in, and there's no more resources to extract. This due to the overexploitation of the resources. because in fact they are destroying it, and they are destroying the Amazonia. And in this case, they are destroying the last forest.
Thank you so much, Daniela, for your contribution. I mean, I think there's lots of truth in what you mentioned. Pranish, do you want to
Yeah.
comment?
In terms of what you just mentioned, so therefore, here's another I would say another side of, I guess, for someone who can argue what you just mentioned. So, and it's something I hear a lot. So it's essentially, and I believe also Bolsonaro has mentioned it too, how can a country move ahead if they're not using the resources that they got? So he's justifying, therefore, climate destruction for economic prosperity. And he uses the United States, he uses the England, he uses Europe, some of the Western countries, and examples that, during the 17 and 1800s, during the Industrial Revolution, there was no questions about the climate then, and these countries were able to essentially destroy the environment, their respectable environments, for economic growth, to see the success they have today. So I know we know better today, but in that point, is the president Bolsonaro making a valid point, a legitimate point? You guys are in Brazil. You guys see the day to day. Is it correct to say that there's no other alternative to economic prosperity while trying to protect the environment?
Yeah, but I guess also the very fact that the capitalist countries are successful is because exactly they explore the underdeveloped countries.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we say, what is a successful capitalist system? Oh, Britain, of course, one of the big ones in the world in terms of economy. But then again, there is Vale, right? Vale is owned partially by British companies. So their wealth is related to our poverty, right?
That's a very good point. And I will just leave it there for us to reflect a little bit about that, because, and I will provoke a little bit more. Davi Copenauer here at UFMG, he mentioned, he said about the word success, right? And he said, what is success? What is success for you? For us, success is to live freely, with, very close to each other, in solidarity, everybody holding their hands. If you need something, I will do everything to help you provide with my other fellow Yanomamis, right? So, what is success? We bought this vision of success. So the UK is extremely successful in this point of view, right? Canada is extremely successful. I love Canada. I mean, it's one of my favorite countries in the world. I have some of my best friends are Canadian, and Canada does an awful, not Canada, but Canadian firms do lots of harm in mining in Brazil. The Norwegians have an aluminum plant in the Tocantins River in the Amazon. They don't have it there, they have it here, right? So let's always think globally, but in a more justice-oriented way, in a social justice-oriented way. That's where we're trying to get something from our indigenous friends there. So in relation to what I think it was Daniela who mentioned about Davi Copenauer's phrase, he writes in this book, The Falling Sky, he says, the forest land which can be translated to forest earth as well, can only die if destroyed by the white people. He says white people. We had a huge discussion about that, if no indigenous or white, how do we call this? And you know, Ailton or Davi did not come to a conclusion in relation to this, but he said, can only die if destroyed by the white people. Then creeks will disappear, the soil will be friable, will be crumbling, trees will die, and rocks in the mountains will crack from heat. Your parents, your shamans, will not be able to call them, the rocks and the nature, to protect us. Urihi is the name they give to their land, to forest land, to forest earth, will become dry and empty. Shamans will no longer be able to stop, to deter the smoke epidemics that I mentioned previously, the malevolent beings that cause disease that cause disease. Thus, all will die, right? So I give this as a bit of a context so that we can jump now to the movie that we were supposed to discuss. But I thought it was necessary for us to think this broader context. We are not indigenous people. We may have distant roots, right? I have a distant root from my great-grandmother in the state of Rio de Janeiro. But, you know, distant roots probably. But we are trying to do this contact, right, with their thinking and bringing it to our way of life, to our thinking, to our democracy, to our autocracies and all that. So I would like to ask, and I would just like to ask you to be brief in your comments, but if you were to write a New York Times film review about the last forest, right? What would be 2 or 3 phrases that you would start with? Who can make this exercise? Everybody's a bit of a film critic, right? Everybody has an opinion about a movie. So who will do that to me? For me, sorry.
Well, from my point of view as a Brazilian, watching the movie was very shocking. Not because I didn't know what was happening to the indigenous people, but because I realized how little we know about the indigenous life and the profound messages they put across. For example, I would highlight, for example, how they share things like I want to have food to share with my brothers. That's what Davi says, right? Mm-hmm. And then we see the kids like wear no clothes and they just pass running with no adult. So there's like free thinkers. So it's this realizing 2 things: how they might be more intelligent, they might be wiser than us, and how horrible the system can be to these people.
Okay.
How harmful the system can be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so can we think of, thank you so much, Luciana. I think this is a key point that comes through the movie, right? I'm trying to picture here, Luciana, how this would fit in the film review. Okay, but it's okay, you know, because usually the critics, they try to say, you know,
I
more
know.
broadly, more
You
distance.
know who's going to do this? Marcos is going to do this because Marcos is a film addict. So
Okay,
help me, Marcos, please.
please, Marcos. What about this movie?
Well, I don't know if I have much to contribute. I think I don't know. I think when I was watching, I was very captivated by the images. Images, I think they are very beautiful. I really like the way the movie is filmed. I think what is also interesting to me, it's the movie is 99% in their language. What to me is also something very, very, very interesting, because I think the first film that I watched that it has so much indigenous people language on it. To me, what really called my attention was this aspects. To me, it was more the visual aspects and the language.
Very good.
I can add something too.
Oh, please.
Okay, so I can say that the movie showed a more authentic and accurate representation, the way that indigenous people would want to be seen, because it was shot from more point of view type of experience. I thought the transitions through the dream time, so when they were talking about what they believed in and who their gods are and how the earth was formed, I thought that was very interesting on how they capture that from, you know, going from the campsite tales, the elder, to kind of like a more to more dramatization of it. But obviously the dramatization helped to capture what he was trying, the elder was trying to say. What else I thought also, in a way, it can be viewed as two ways, because we're all human. So one person, if you want to just be dichotomous about it, one person can view it as, you know, there are people still living like this, that there are people still out there that are not in our Western sense of the word living to their best life, that there's still people that need to get educated, that what are these kids doing naked? They should have clothes. They should going to school. They need to be growing up to be lawyers and doctors or this or that. Why are they wasting their time hunting all day when they could be doing something more productive? On the other hand, the more positive sense of it is that we as humans, that there are other ways of life out there. There are other values in life which are worth pursuing. There are other ways to live in life, and that factually and shownly, that people are able to live happy and unhindered and unbothered, and it's not really a view of hardship. It's simply just another way of life in itself. So that's the more positive way to look at it. That they're succeeding in their sense by, you know, living a happy life and being unfestered and unbothered by society or society's troubles.
Yeah.
There's someone in the chat saying something, Professor.
Cindy Bueno Sanchez.
Yes.
Where are you from, Cindy?
Would you like me to read the question?
Please.
I think as I watched it, I failed to realize how recent this was. I understand that all of these issues are ongoing with continued colonization of areas with indigenous peoples and rapid deforestation in places like the Amazon. The visuals were beautiful, as well as the storytelling. Often it was a story within a story. The end is what shocked me, because they mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic, which is so recent and also feels like it started ages ago. I don't often hear about the effect of the global pandemic within Indigenous communities all over the world and how the COVID-19 pandemic reached them in the first place. Also, there were several moments in the story where dialogue wasn't even necessary, only goes to show how compelling this documentary is. Also, I am from the USA. That was a review.
Oh, Cindy is from the USA. Cindy, I don't know what your background, academic background is, but I see a reviewer of the New York Times there. I could have read that somewhere. Very, very good. I mean, it very encompassing and all that. So thank you very much for your contribution.
And then let's hear from
and I'm
my
serious, it really touched me. Okay.
That was really good.
Maiguna?
Yes, okay. Thank you for this opportunity. I also want to say my insight regarding this film. And I would like to start with the point that it's the first film like I did watch and with the subtitle and I didn't fall asleep. Because like when I'm watching with subtitle, it becomes so boring. But this film was so interesting because I saw there or I wish there some unexpected things I saw in this movie. First of all, I paid attention to how people are not searching for help as we are doing nowadays, like only Google, like we are searching. Well, if we need something, we are just searching on Google, but they are asking help from each other. For example, when the woman just lost her husband, she just searched for someone who can help her to bring her husband back. But nowadays we can do just search on internet, maybe some tricks we can use in order to bring husband back, or it's just an example. And also another thing, when they just it was so interesting for me when they compared themselves with animals when they go when they went hunting, and they just collected some stones, and the man said, oh, these are the stones that crocodile can eat, why we cannot eat it? And it was very interesting because they are comparing themselves with animals. It is something different. We are also comparing ourselves, but not for sure with animals. Because of that, it was also interesting. And there is, yes, it's just kind of insight or in my side.
Perfect. Argelia, do you also want to add?
Yes, I want to go back a bit to the issue, not the issue, but I was just so impressed by the fact that it's in their native language, because hipore kahiwaka shaka purepacha hoperu horengwarishaka sa beach. I don't really speak my language very much because I was raised somewhat in the diaspora. So it was just it's hard to learn too when you don't have the materials and the people to speak with. So for me, seeing the language was just something very powerful. Excellent.
What's your ethnicity of origin, Argelia?
Purepecha. It's from Michoacan, Mexico. Purepecha.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah. Now Victoria, I think, wants to.
Victoria.
I am Victoria from Nigeria. I'm a fourth-year law student of the University of Ibadan. I think looking at the movie, the first thing that comes to my mind is colonization. Because I don't have a Brazilian origin, so I probably wouldn't relate to the indigenous things, but colonization comes first. Then another thing that comes to mind is women, the strength of women, because when that lady's husband died, she took on the role of the man in society. And this is very opposed to the thought that women in indigenous societies are treated as properties, but in this society, women are treated as strong people, because the woman was talking about forming an association. So it shows the strength of a woman. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Perfect.
I wish we could combine all this and have a collective comment, because each part just came like a puzzle, and it makes so much sense to me what you guys said. So thank you very much for that, because you also expanded my thought when I first saw this movie. I saw it several times. What Pranish mentioned, for instance, about the transition, when this transition from what was their lives and more like a documentary, and then it shots right into dramatization, right? So with my colonized mind, at first I was a little uncomfortable with that. Well, then I realized that for them, it's not dramatization. For them, is a way of talking about their way of living, their values, their beliefs, and their will to defeat the invader, defeat the colonizer, right? So for me, it was strongly symbolic. And so for them, this is real. It's not dramatization. And they have those encounters. We have around, how many? 40,000 Yanomamis in Brazil. There are a few in Venezuela as well, but most of them are in Brazil, 40,000, and they live in an area that is 2 times the size of Switzerland, for you guys to have an idea. 40,000 people living in a forest that is 2 sizes the size of Switzerland. So if we think about this, you have isolated Yanomamis that encounter more and more illegal mining, illegal, quote unquote, because they are tolerated. They are the authorities know that they are there, and they don't do anything about it. Okay, they are accomplices of those invasions. So there is prostitution. There are diseases spread. There are kidnapping of especially women, right? There is hunger in some areas because they pollute the rivers with mercury and everything, and the fish die. So that's what Davi Copenau was reporting to us as well. So he said that he made an appeal, not an appeal, he made a demand to UFMG clearly with our rector there, our president, who is Dr. Sandra is a stout defensor of indigenous causes in Brazil. And he faced her and he said, UFMG has to do something about it, because our youth, part of our youth, are being co-opted by the miners, in many different ways. So, we see the reality. The other thing that I call the attention for in the comments, I like the way that you did, Pranish, look at how could someone that has a colonizer mind see this movie, and us that are making an effort to think broadly, would see it. And the third view would be exactly the view of indigenous people, right? Who see that thing normally. The only film review, well, there is in Variety, the Rotten Tomato, those things, because this movie was in Netflix, but the only newspaper that I saw some review was the Los Angeles Times. And they say something that called my attention, that this guy, Luis Bolognese, the director, he looks clearly on, the Los Angeles Times has that he provided a platform with their own voice and words, right? And I would go farther, and with their dreams, because the dream for them is fundamental. There is no dichotomy between dreams and what we would call reality of daily life. For them, it's the same thing. They are together. The dream is part of your life, and you better listen to them. That for them, it's fundamental to listen to their dreams. So I think the movie depicts this very well. This is what I'm saying, I'm awake. This is what I'm saying, I'm sleeping. This is what I'm saying, and I'm under the influence of some of the medicine that the forest provides, right? That they use in rituals. So all this comes together. The other issue that my guru mentioned, that I think is very helpful as well, is that you can follow the movie even without subtitles, because it's so visually intense, and that really touches us. That's very good. And again, when you mention not searching for Google, they search for their dreams. They search for the knowledge of the elders, right? And I think it's much safer than Google in this sense, very much safer. And Cindy, again, congratulations, Cindy, that you summarized so well, and I understand that you are studying history. Well, you mentioned the ongoing colonization, and that is really key, the way I see it, right? A continuing colonization. So, in this Spanish, I think, calls our attention that colonization is not something that happened so many years ago and that disappeared. It just has other forms, but we are living it intensively. Colonization by social media, including the media will vary, but the acts of colonization are continuing many different forms, including with us being actors of colonization in our relations with other people, with our family, with colleagues, with the society, right? So I think the movie really helped me to reflect about that. You know, it's an ongoing colonization, but these people are resisting. They are resisting. So going back to that dichotomy that you used for us, an example, Pranish, I think when you say, well, someone would say, well, there is a better life than the life they lived. For them, there is no better life than that one. David Copenhagen said this clearly, said, I want to live as we have lived for hundreds of years. That's what we want. It's interesting that I think it was Marcela that mentioned also the quilombolas. No, it was, sorry, I lost the name. Our colleague from Itabira. That
Anna,
mentioned,
isn't it? I think it's Anna.
Ana,
Beleza.
that mentioned about the quilombos, the quilombolas, which are communities of escaped enslaved people, right? That continue to exist until today. And they, you know, in the quilombolas, it's the same thing. They say, we don't want, the mining offered a fortune to them for their land close to where I live. I work with those quilombos, and they say, we don't want your money. We want the current quality of life that we have. Keep your money for you. We don't want it, but keep our land as it is, right? So I think that's a very powerful call that, in a way, the movie brings to us this discussion as well. They would say, you know, the person that Pranish imagined, that was saying, you know, they could be better educated, they could have better clothes, maybe they could have, you know, use the luxury brands that some of us dispute in the, you know, in the stores, in the magazines. They don't want any of this. You know, they think we are savages, that we are very badly educated. You know, because how can someone live with the level of stress that we live, the level of exposure to pollutants and to all sorts of poisons that we do live, right? It's a big question. And finally, Argelia mentioned also about the native language. So it was beautiful that you shared with us your roots as well, Argelia, and because one of the discussions that this movie brings is exactly, okay, this represents 40,000 people living in a huge area in the forest. Until relatively recently, they were pretty isolated. Their land is recognized as their land only. This last month, it was celebrated 30 years that the land was first recognized as their land by the Brazilian state. And, you know, this is something that really calls our attention, that there is, although it's a very specific ethnicity with their own myths, their own philosophy, their own vision, there are many, and I have seen this again and again, there are many similarities of the Amerindian cosmovision of the indigenous populations all over the Americas. And I have seen, we just had the last discipline that we had someone from Ghana that came from indigenous population as well. And we found so many similarities. It was unbelievable. You were talking about the First Nations in Canada, and we had this experience. I went to a meeting in the University of Toronto with several representatives, of First Nations in Canada. And this person that I mentioned, Dana Kambeba, she was a medical student by then. This was just pre-pandemic. And so the first night we went out to have dinner, and she was talking with Bill Wilthworth, who is a Blackfoot from Canada. And he was talking in English, and she was talking in Portuguese. And, neither knew the other language. And they were having a conversation. And I was there as an interpreter in the dinner table between the two of them. And I did not interpret anything because they were responding to each other. It was amazing. It was almost, if I was not a scientist, I would say it was an esoteric experience, but because they had so many similarities. She would talk about Mother Earth. He would talk about Mother Earth. And then it would go on, and they really talk to each other. So I'm very glad, Argelia, that you brought this experience also to us. In Victoria, this huge country of Nigeria. By the way, Victoria, I don't know if you know that, but Brazil is the second largest Black population in the world after Nigeria. Okay, so we have things, we have contexts here that we really have to reflect about. So colonization is an issue to both of us, although we are celebrating formally this 7th of September, 200 years of independence from the original colonizers, the Portuguese. And your independence was much later. But we experience the same effects of colonization from 200 years ago that you still experience in Nigeria, I would dare say. Okay, and you mentioned also about the role of women in this, and I think this was a very powerful comment as well. So, see, we, I think, made an excellent film review in which we contextualized many things. So just thinking again, the context.
We
Yes,
have
please.
two comments. Do you want to finish
Please,
what you were going to
please.
say?
No. Please go ahead.
Daniela Castro note says, we could say, what a precarious life they're living. She was commenting on your talk. But in fact, that's their life, the life they want to live. They're happy like that, and we don't have the right to change it.
Thank you.
And also Valerie, I think, wants to say a few words.
Yes, thank you. I am from Panama, the Technological University of Panama. I am hearing all the comments and what you're talking about. Here recently in Panama, we have a trouble with all this stuff, all the things, and the people who go to the streets, to the protests, and make the rights value are the indigenous, are that people that we call the minorities, but they are really know who is the value of nature and flora and fauna. And I think that one of our problems, the most of I think it is to not empathize with others, to think that the problem of my neighbor is not my problem, and we live in that opinion that is incorrect. And this movie made me realize again and again that we need to do something about that. And thank you.
Excellent, Valerie. And well, Panama has a very solid indigenous culture, the Kunas, Nigobe, the Embera, the Uracá. So again, this is an experience. I visit Panama many times, and I found in some indigenous populations also this common, common feature of solidarity, as you mentioned, and being there one for the other. So I hope the Panamanian, people can value this and learn to value as we are trying to do today in this discussion. So, okay, so I think we covered a lot. And I see that Ana Luisa Vaz Barbosa raised her hand. around our
I'm sorry
campfire.
to delay the finish, but I would like to say a little. Um, I was really impressed with the movie and how the movie goes on with a few dialogues and this beautiful photography. And despite this, it's a really intense movie. And the thing that um, impressed me the most was when they were talking in the river. The cacique was saying that when the goalkeepers arrived in the place and offering gifts, they couldn't accept this. They shouldn't accept this, and it is the same. It is happening the same way that it happened in like 500 years ago. The motto is still this: the colonizers arrive and think that they can offer better life and better opportunity, and that they know what is the best for the people and for the region. But um, the movie shows us that's not like that, and I think this movie is awesome, and it was a great okay. That's it.
Well, this was not an accident. This was on purpose, because the chants speak so much. I mean, they touch us, under the skin, I would say. So, Ana Luisa, thank you so much for your comment. I mean, the film goes beyond any words or translation or anything. It's just out there, right? And just to remind a bit about the Yanomami, as I mentioned, around 40,000, this huge area. They call their forest earth, where they live, they call Uribi, and they say Kami, Yamaki, Uribe. And this is our land, our earth land, right? And at the same time, Davi Kopenawa mentions in this book, Falling Sky, that white people write books because their thoughts are full of forgetfulness, right? So he decided to write a book also because of this. Let them not forget, let them remember, they leave aside forgetfulness, because our society is so addicted in forgetfulness, right? Oh, I had a tough day. I'll go home, I'll drink a glass of wine, and I watch a Netflix, and I will forget about everything. I will forget that Brazil is struggling between two radical views of the world. A view that wants solidarity, wants a more equal society, a less unjust society in which equity prevails, in which social justice prevails, right? I think we are in a situation that is a crossroads. It's divisive. The population is, I hope I am totally exaggerating, but we are on the verge of a civil war, in the sense, not maybe the secession war of the US. It's a war in other forms. It's a civil war in other forms. You know, I cannot live in a society in which I walk among so much misery, so much unnecessary misery. Brazil is the first of second exporters of several agricultural commodities. We export everywhere, and we have currently 33 million people on experiencing hunger, right? So, you know, I think we are in this divisive way. In this sense, I think about what Ailton Krenak calls our epistemological divide. He calls that the indigenous people, most of them in Brazil, they have one epistemological principle, which is that indigenous people want to live glued to the earth, as he mentioned, and don't admit the landowner, the private property of the land as a foundation of society. And he mentions this clearly in the ideas to postpone the end of the world. It's a radically different way. He says, you know, white people step very heavily on earth, and we want to step lightly on earth, right? As part of the earth, not as the owners of the land. So we may say, well, I don't own land property, but we live in a society that there are owners of private property. And we see, maybe we don't have a deed saying that we own a land, but we live in a society that really wants when we talk about the earth, we say our earth, it's ours. It's not ours only, right? Besides the whole humanity, we have so many other living beings that are fundamental to our survival, right? So that's what this philosophy, you may say, this cosmovision brings to us and help us really think beyond. I saw that here, and I think we missed, Luciana, Samuel Adejub.
Yes,
Want
I will
to make
say
a comment.
something.
Please, Samuel.
And we are approaching the end. So if he wants to say something, is he here? And Samuel,
Yes,
would you like to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to just quickly say something. I would have talked, but I wasn't in the age where I could talk at the time. When Victoria was talking about, I'm also Samuel. I'm from Nigeria. I'm from Nigeria, and then you talked about the fact after Nigeria, Brazil also has the largest Black community. So I was able to relate to the movie because immediately I saw the first scene. I just remember my ordeal, my narrative when I was somewhere in Osun State in Nigeria. And then I looked at the environment. So when Victoria was talking to you the other time, talking about colonization, I'm looking more at decolonization in the sense that before the colonization, you could sense the communal living, their science in living together. You could sense some other things. So, but the colonization has a way of letting us think or letting us be inferior of ourselves. Do you understand? And like I said, I could relate to Nigeria also in the sense that people living then in those communal environments where they live in huts and then they use streams and water, that seems to thrive more. And then it gave me a little nostalgia. And it seems to thrive more than now when we have civilization and urbanization And in Lagos, for instance, in Lagos, Nigeria, where everybody is just running there to scatter, trying to get the rat race, that tranquility you will see at the beginning of the movie cannot be seen in Lagos now. But if you go to the exterior parts of Nigeria, you could see the tranquility before they invaded them. You could see that tranquility, you could see how everybody living together in peace and harmony. And that is what I think Nigeria, and also research also in my Institute of African Study in UI, is also trying to look at how we can decolonize ourselves, how we can come back to a place where we can live that communal nature. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Samuel. I think this is, what we call in Brazil a chave de ouro, the golden key to come to everything we had discussed. And you raised something that comes very close to colonialism, and it's the big elephant under the table that we did not talk about openly in this discussion, but in many different ways, which is racism, as one of the huge global crises that we continue to experience, and that is so linked to colonialism and anti-racism. We are part of the ones, and UFMG is part of the ones that think that it's not enough to not be racist. We have to be anti-racist. It's not enough to try not to be a colonizer, but we have to be anti-colonization, and we have to decolonize ourselves, as Samuel so beautifully put it. So just to close, I would like to make an appeal to you. And, probably in the coming months, I could be accused of high treason to say this, but I think we need all the international support we can get to support indigenous communities in Brazil. Politically, in terms of even going to the point, as the European Union is doing now, of not accepting commodities that come from indigenous lands, right? Diamonds, gold, and all sorts of other stuff, cattle and all that. So we are little by little looking at the resistance of indigenous people in Brazil, because when we talk about them, that it has been very bad, this current government, they say, yeah, no doubt about that. But we have been living with this for 500 years, 522 years, right? So we are used to this, and we have resisted. We have survived in the forest without all the stuff that you need to survive. So we are the ones who may survive when the sky falls, when when there is the end of the world, as we know. We will continue. We are the ones that are more prepared than you are to survive, okay? But we need all the support that we can get. And I just suggest that you think a bit how you could build yourselves this support, and maybe bring later on to Luciana as a I wouldn't say a homework, but as a reflection. Okay, so thank you so much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed, and I passed 3 minutes of my time, but I thank you so much.
Professor, I wish we would be here for another 5 hours. I have no words to express the gratitude I have for what happened, right, this past 2 hours, and all the insightful thinking you proposed us, and how the sharing took place. So I would also like to thank the students who contributed to make this discussion so rich. Once again, UFMG Summer School in Brazilian Studies is thankful to you and is honored to have you with us. And on behalf of the Office of International Affairs and Professor Aziz, our Dean, I thank you for accepting the invitation, and thank you very, very much. This was incredible, amazing. Thank you.